Hello, this is Scott with Hi-Lux Optics. Today I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of mounting vintage reproduction scopes on vintage reproduction rifles. Now, typically, the most straightforward way to mount any of these scopes on these kind of rifles would be to drill and tap the barrel or the receiver in order to put them on top. But let's be honest, some of these old rifles look especially pretty. And maybe you've had your eye on them for quite some time and don't want to mar the finish, or maybe I'm just talking about me here. In that case, we have developed a few specialized mounts that allow you to put these reproduction scopes on rifles like this, provided they fit certain specifications and haven't been modified too heavily. In the case of the Henry Golden Boy, all you're going to need is a dovetail and about this much room. First, to make sure that we can fit this mount on, I'm going to have to remove this rear sight right here. So let me go ahead and speed through the video real quick as I get to work knocking that thing out. And there we have it. Now that the sight's removed, let me go ahead and talk you all through how this is going to fit on and then actually go ahead and get it set up so I can take this out to the range in just a couple days. Now, looking at this rifle, there are already 2 holes drilled into the barrel. That tells me off the bat that it seems to be okay to drill into the barrel, but I would have to drill another pair in order to mount a second block for both of these rings to fit on the rifle. I'm going to go ahead and use the easier method. Let's take a moment to open this up. As you can see, this no machining mount fits onto the Henry Golden Boy pretty exactly. If you have a slightly different rifle or a different modified Henry or a Golden Boy in a different caliber, please check and give us a call, send us your barrel diameter or some other measurement so we could try and help you figure out if this will fit properly. But Henry Golden Boy in .22 caliber, this is going to fit in without us having to do really any extra work. I'm not even going to Loctite it, but you can if you want to. The first step, we're going to be taking this dovetail out of the mount that it comes attached to when it arrives. We keep them tied together so nothing gets lost in shipping or falls out of a corner of the box, but let's go ahead and disassemble that now. Oh, and this would probably be a good minute for me to go ahead and speed up the video. And now we have the dovetail completely separate. It doesn't particularly matter which way you put it in. Just go ahead and slide that right on in. Ooh, that's a little tight, isn't it? Pause for a moment while I address this issue. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I know that intermission may have seemed like brief moments to you, but believe me, I just went down the rabbit hole of learning journeys. So let's start with some things that I have just uncovered about the Henry Golden Boy new production. The newer Henry Golden Boys apparently have 2 screw holes drilled back here, which are hidden by the sight when it's normally installed. These are supposed to go to some sort of over-the-receiver picatinny setup. I don't have it on hand, I can't test it out, but our particular mount doesn't have any need for those holes. So whether you have an older production Henry Golden Boy or a newer one with or without the holes, all we need is for you to have a 3/8 dovetail right there. Which unfortunately brings me to my second point. Apparently on this particular Henry Golden Boy, the dovetail at the rear was not finished. There's some good burr on there. Anyway, the solution to that was just trimming down the dovetail block a little bit on each side, about 10/1000ths in total. That way it can fit into there without me having to modify the rifle. At some point in the near future, I'm probably going to trim up that edge and get it square, but For today, I think I'm just going to work on the replaceable dovetail block. Anyway, let me show you what this dovetail block looks like. I'm going to try not to block it. It can go in either direction, and it just slips right in there. You could center it at this stage if you wanted to, but I'm going to leave this a little bit loose so that I can use the rest of the mount to make sure that it's centered. This dovetail block on its own is not meant to be as hammer-in tight as the normal sights might be. Instead, when you finish up and tighten this center screw, it's going to force the dovetail block up into the edges of the dovetail cut, and that's going to keep it pretty steady. All that friction is meant to do really is keep it from sliding out left to right, which this mount will also help with by fitting onto the octagonal barrel. The forward and back recoil is handled by the walls that are to the front and back of this dovetail cut. So as long as it has contact in there and is sitting in the dovetail cut, that's going to function properly as well. Let me go ahead and put this mount on after I talk about just one other little point. The blocks that come on here are separable. You can take these screws out, you can take this block out and flip it around. Actually, why don't I just show you? That makes a lot more sense. I'm going to speed up the video right now. And there we have it, back in normal time. I'm going to set this down right quick and show you another neat little trick. So the blocks that come with your scope in the kit, conveniently, are also going to be drilled to the same spacing on the hole. I'm trying not to cover this up with my fingers here. If you wanted to, you could use whichever set of blocks suits you best. I personally am going to stick with the ones that came on the mount, but in reality there'd be no difference. I guess then you'll just have 2 sets of blocks. Speeding it back up so I can go ahead and put these screws back in and we'll get right to it. All right, we're ready to carry on. This mount only goes onto your barrel in one direction. The arms of it are a slightly different length, so if you tried to mount it backwards, it'd be pretty easy to see that it's not going to fit. If that's the case, flip it right around, and there you go. I'm now going to go ahead and push it down, make sure it's sitting properly on the barrel, and using that to center my dovetail. Looks pretty centered. Now let's go ahead and get this tightened in. By tightening that center screw again, we're forcing this dovetail block up into the dovetail cut. So that's in there pretty sturdy. Doesn't feel like it's coming out. You could Loctite that screw in if you wanted to, but I'm not going to at this stage so that I can take it back off later and address that bit of burr back there. And personally, I would recommend blue Loctite. The red stuff is that's rough stuff getting out. There you are. Now, these 2 screw holes on the outsides of the mount here lead down into these threaded portions on the dovetail block. When you put the 2 screws through here, it tightens this down and pulls the dovetail block up even harder so that it's mounted as surely and securely as you possibly could get it. There we are. Screw 1. Screw 2, and now I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video and we'll pick up right again in a moment. And there we have it. The mount is now fully installed. Everything from here on out is going to be about putting my scope on the mount. So, if you already know how to put this onto the blocks, Well, I suppose this would be a good time to pause the video, and I will say, I hope you all have fun. But if you'd like to follow along as I install this, then this will just take a few more minutes. Let me go ahead and take the block out of the remaining ring. Again, these are both the same size, but I really only need one of each, so I'm going to keep these for later. The crossbolt goes on the right side, and I've made sure that that is where the crescent cut, which these rings have, will fit on. Let me make sure that my thumb nut is properly loosened. That way it is not blocking off the edge of the channel and potentially going to catch on one of these blocks. And the only last thing I have to do, to change the position of the front ring, I need to loosen up this sliding locking ring. If you're using the all-black A5 style scopes, this will actually be on the front, on the top, so it'll be backwards, and it'll be a ring that is meant to prevent it from sliding. For both of them, you can do the exact same thing and just loosen up this screw here, which I will go ahead and do now. And now, you can change the position of your front ring. I'm going to leave that loose until I have the eye position and the eye relief all set up, and then we'll be done actually. Aside from zeroing, which I'm really looking forward to. This mount slides on, and let me actually flip this around right now. There we are. Now that we're all flipped around, I can show you. Wiggle that a little bit to make sure that the crossbolt properly sits in. I know it may not be much to look at, but as you're tightening these rings down, you'll feel the crossbolt settling down on the edge of that cup. So as you wiggle it back and forth a bit and tighten it down, it's going to naturally center itself and set right on that crossbolt. All right, that looks like it's pretty in. And again, I'm not going to tighten this up all the way right now, just because I'm going to take it all off in a few minutes and clean up the burr on the back end of that dovetail cut. But for now, let's get the eye relief and the crosshair all centered and set up. It's a good idea to check for your natural aim point. Make sure you have a full sight picture. With a scope and a rifle like this, you may find your head floating a little bit, and you may have to put on some sort of cheek piece or riser right here. I've made a little one out of leather that I'm going to put on, but for now, just to check the eye relief, I'm thinking my head will be right about here. That seems good. Now let's get the crosshair centered. And there we are. Now the final step. This is where I would like the final position of this scope to be when I pull it back into battery. If you have a scope that is not meant to slide, then this is just the position it's going to be in. For scopes that slide though, you need to make sure that the sliding locking ring is pulled all the way back to meet the front ring at this position. That way, whenever you pull the scope back into battery, this right here is naturally where it's going to fall. It's set up like so. Let me go ahead and tighten this ring in. And there we are. On heavier caliber rifles, you'll notice this particular two-tone scope sliding forward, then you have to pull it back into battery. On a 22, it's probably not going to move all that much. You're going to want to make sure and check and pull this back into battery if you notice your eye relief creeping on you a little bit. Or, of course, swapping this out for a tube locking collar as opposed to one of these sliding locking rings is also an option. Most parts are interchangeable between our 3/4 inch scopes, so please check along with the, oh goodness, what did I call it? The very comprehensive Malcolm Interchangeable Parts Guide. That's a mouthful. But it'll go over everything that can be exchanged among these scopes. This particular mount can fit any of our shorter Malcolm scopes from the Unertal 8 power, the two-tone 6 power, the 18-inch 6 power A5 style, and the 17-inch 3 power A5 style. Worst case, you'll just have to loosen up those blocks, flip them around so the right cut is on the literal right side, and you'll be good to go. Everything else shouldn't require any machining unless, of course, your dovetail cut was somewhat mangled. If that's the case, a file or a Dremel, and you should be able to take down the dovetail block itself on the sides without having to modify your rifle in any way. I'm now going to go ahead and take this out to the range and get it sighted in, because I've been waiting more than 2 days, and that's far too long with a rifle this pretty. I hope you all have fun with your Henry Golden Boys, and give us a call. Let us know what you've been shooting. Take it easy.